Hello and welcome to our brand new show, Discussion Today on Rajya Sabha TV. I'm Teena Jha. Starting today, every morning, we are going to discuss with distinguished experts who will put into perspective topics of current significance for us. On the show today, we are going to talk about the US elections and the Indian diaspora. And the focus that we will be looking to understand is the importance of the Indian-American vote. Now, according to the Carnegie Endowment report, the United States has 1.9 million Indian-American voters. So they may account for just about 0.82% of the total registered voters in the country. But Indian Americans enjoy tremendous attention, not only because of their growing influence in closely contested swing states of the country, but also for their emerging status as key campaign contributors. Then, of course, there is the selection of Kamala Harris as the running mate of Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, and the Modi-Trump bonhomie that the entire world has witnessed in recent years. Both factors have shown the spotlight on the Indian-American community and brought the US election closer to Indians themselves. Over the past few months, we've seen both parties have furiously quoted the Indian-American vote, wooing them by a series of advertisements and speeches by prominent leaders of both major parties. So the question is, which way will the Indian-American vote swing this time around? To help us understand that and the growing influence of the Indian diaspora in the US politics, we're being joined on the show today by Mr. Yashwant Raj. He is a US correspondent of Hindustan Times. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. And we also have with us Yoshita Singh. She is Chief Correspondent, PTI. She's joining us on the show from New York. A very warm welcome to both distinguished guests for joining us on discussion today this morning. So the interesting fact that I pointed out during my introduction is that the Indian Americans comprise less than 1% of the total voters in the United States, but they remain in the spotlight of both major parties. Both sides, as I told you, have been trying to woo the Indian Americans in different ways. So before I go to Yoshita and understand what's behind this increased attention to the Indian American community, let's hear what both candidates, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, had to say about India and the Indian American community.
So my question was about Indian Americans. Do you think they are voting for you? Are they supporting you?
I do. We had an event in Houston, as you know, and it was a fantastic event. I was invited by Prime Minister Modi, and this was a massive. This was at where they play football, the Houston football team, and it was incredible. It was actually incredible, and the Prime Minister could not have been more generous. We have great support from India. We have great support from Prime Minister Modi, and I would think that the people. Indian people would be voting for Trump. I also, as you know, went to India just prior to the pandemic setting in, because India's been hit very hard. Left really about a week before that. And we had an incredible time. What we saw, the people are so incredible. It's really an incredible place, an incredible country. And it's definitely big. It's definitely big. But you've got a great leader, and he's a great person.
As president, I'll also continue to rely on Indian American diaspora. It keeps our two nations together, as I have throughout my career. My constituents in Delaware, my staff in the Senate, the Obama-Biden administration, which had more Indian Americans than any other administration in the history of this country, and this campaign with Indian Americans at senior levels, which of course includes the top of the heap. Our dear friend will be the first Indian American vice president in the history of the United States of America, Kamala Harris. We all know she's smart, she's tested, she's prepared. But another thing that makes Kamala so inspiring is her mother's immigrant story to America that started in India with the pure courage that brought her daughters to this moment. I know the pride you feel. It's your story too. For your sacrifices and your family's courage. You become pillars of our community and our country.
You heard both these leaders. Let's now understand from Yoshita What exactly is the reason behind this growing influence of the Indian American community in US politics?
Right. Thank you, Teena. And as you mentioned early on, citing the Carnegie report, that the Indian American community, the voters, they form a small percentage, but now both the parties are seeing that this is a percentage that they cannot afford to ignore, because going into the elections in the battleground states of, say, Florida or Michigan, Pennsylvania, every vote will count. And these Indian American voters number in the thousands. So we can imagine what difference these thousands of Indian American voters can make in the final election tally of either the Democratic candidate or for President Trump. And over these years, we've seen that the Indian American community has grown not only in influence, but in affluence as well. They are coming out more and more, becoming more and more vocal about what policies impact them, whether it's the Democratic Party or Republican Party. They don't want to be sitting on the sidelines anymore. We are seeing more and more Indian American lawmakers in US Congress. So clearly, this is a demographic that neither the Republican Party or the Democratic Party can afford to ignore, because they know that in the swing states, what will eventually matter are these thousands of votes that can eventually make the whole lot of difference. We've seen it in the 2016 election, and it's become even more pronounced now in this year's election. And as both the candidates have said, that they have strong support from the Indian American community, and obviously in the Democratic Party with Kamala Harris's vice presidential nomination, things have really changed for the Indian American community in this election, and that is why we are seeing both the parties going all out to woo these very crucial voters.
Completely. So
Teena.
both sides certainly trying to woo the Indian American voters because of the way the Indian Americans are coming out prominently in public life in the United States. So we'll come and understand how much of an impact Kamala Harris is making on the Indian American community. But before that, coming to you, Mr. Yashwant Singh, is this kind of outreach by the main political parties towards the Indian community unprecedented, or has this happened before? It's come into prominence only because of social media in recent years. Have you ever witnessed such a kind of outreach by both parties, where both candidates are confident that they are going to claim a lot of votes of the Indian American community?
No, this is really the first time I've seen this kind of outreach to the Indian American community from both parties. Now, till now, the biggest this kind of outreach was done by Donald Trump in 2016. October, in an outreach to the Indian community in New Jersey. That was till now. That was then the biggest outreach of that kind that was ever done by a presidential nominee of a major political party. Indian Americans have been involved in politics for a long time. They've been writing checks, but in recent years, they've really come forward to participate in elections, take part, run for office, and from Congress to statewide elections to municipal bodies, local bodies, etc. So there has been a growing interest in the Indian American community to actually participate, influence things, and see where things can go with them. And this time is really unprecedented. This kind of an outreach, as you know, former Vice President Joe Biden, he actually announced an expansive agenda program for Indian Americans and India. And that kind of an expansive agenda had never been released before by any other presidential nominees. Most times they would put in a paragraph or two in the party platform about how they will be, they will continue to support good ties with India because India is an important rising power. But this kind of an outreach that former Vice President Biden did this time hasn't been done before. And President Trump, of course, has been reaching out to the community from the time he first, did that rally in New Jersey in 2016 October. So it's been mission creep, but mission creep as in it's kind of been growing slowly, but it's really come out in the open this time with this kind of outreach from both parties to the community. And as you know from the Carnegie report, and there was another survey before the Carnegie report, which actually talked about how this community is becoming very important. Politically. So yes, this is unprecedented. It never happened haven't seen this kind of outreach before.
All right, certainly, the unprecedented outreach is completely visible on social media through the speeches of both prominent leaders. And in fact, we also heard a prominent Democratic leader also say that the Indian American community this time is being seen as an absolute difference maker in the elections. So how much of an impact do you see this community making in the elections this time?
That's a claim that has been put forward all around. Based on the fact that President Trump won the 2016 election by very thin margins in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, really thin margin, 10,000 votes and 0.1% difference, something like that. So a claim being put forward by the community, both the parties, is that the community, small as it is, it can make a difference in these states, swing states, where margins of defeat or victory can be really small. So it is to be seen how critical a role will Indian Americans play. We need to test this out. But yes, there is this narrative coming out of both the campaigns and the community that the community could make a difference, even though it's only 1.9 million eligible voters in the country. And numbers in swing states, you can imagine proportionately how big or small will they be. But this proposition that Indian American community will make a difference will be tested this time, and that will be the real proof of the clout of the community going forward.
Okay, Yoshita, what's your opinion? What do you think? Is it just the battleground states or other states as well where the Indian American community could make it or break it?
I agree as to what Yashwant said, that going forward, the Indian American community's clout will be more visible. But definitely, I think more in the battleground states, because these are the states where a few thousand votes can make all the difference. And like we've seen last year in Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, even in Texas this time, where there are about 150,000 Indian American voters. I mean, so they really have the power to sort of tilt the scales in either sides, and the clout of the Indian Americans is growing. And going forward, I mean, this election will definitely put the Indian Americans in a greater spotlight. But going forward, I mean, there will be more Indian American voters coming of age, second generation or third generation American-born Indian people who will be able to vote. So clearly, this is a demographic that will have a lot of say going forward, and especially in battleground states, because in the end, it all comes down to the wires in these states. And each vote will count, and as to who wins the Electoral College, all that will make a lot of difference. So the Indian American community, even though it's a small vote share as compared to the other communities, but that can really tilt the favor in either party's support. So that's again, we'll have to see how the Indian Americans voted, how much of the Kamala Harris effect came into being, and how much of the Trump and Modi bonhomie came into being. So that can be assessed later, but clearly,
exactly. So that assessment will come later. But what's your ground assessment? You pointed out about the second generation impact. Do you think the selection of Kamala Harris as the running mate of Joe Biden could swing the Indian American voters towards the Democratic Party?
Well, the Indian American voters traditionally have voted for the Democratic Party, and even in the Carnegie survey that came out, it said that about 72% of the Indian American voters still plan to vote for Biden, and about 22% or in the range for President Trump. But definitely seeing Kamala Harris as a vice presidential nominee, I mean, she's the first woman vice presidential nominee, the first Asian of Asian descent. So that clearly has galvanized a lot of people, especially in the Democratic Party, to go out and vote, and to see somebody of their image and of their like at such a high position in office. And 4 years down the line, she could be running for president. There's also talk of Nikki Haley, who is President Trump's former UN envoy. There's also talk of whether she would be standing up for elections in 4 years. So Nikki Haley versus Kamala Harris, I mean, it's a possibility that a lot of people are seeing can come true. So clearly, again, this will also sort of speak to the importance of the Indian American votes going forward. So definitely the Kamala Harris selection has energized the Democratic voters to sort of go forward and even vote more for her.
Okay. As you said that, traditionally the Indian American community has stood behind the Democrats. Let me take that question to Mr. Singh. Sir, what do you think? Last time around, we saw the Republicans making some inroads into the Indian American community. Is that trend expected to continue this time?
There was Republicans, 60% of Indian Americans voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And there was the Trump campaign expects and hopes to increase that number. But as you know, the Carnegie survey said only about 22% of Indian Americans are going to vote for Trump. There was another survey earlier which had a smaller sample size, but they said President Trump's vote share will probably go up to 28%, and that was seen as remarkable improvement and remarkable inroad by President Trump into the community. But Carnegie had a larger sample survey, and its margin of error was ±3, I think, which is a pretty good outcome. So going with Carnegie, if 22% of Indian Americans are going to vote for Trump, he may not have moved the needle very much. He has gone up from 16 to 22%, but not as stark and as significant as had been expected or been. That was a narrative given out by the Trump campaign and some supporters that Trump has made major inroads. But having said that, I don't think Indians are going back to the Democratic Party from the Republican Party, because that shift never happened. I mean, not very many Indians shifted to the Republican Party that they not need to go back now. There has been a gradual movement towards Republican Party. There are some Indian Americans who are moving towards the Republican Party, and that's been a gradual process over years now. But there has been no dramatic shift yet. No.
Okay. Yoshita, so which one of these surveys is going to stand true? That remains to be seen, and that can be seen only after the 3rd of November. But what do you think about Donald Trump's policies, the camaraderie that we have witnessed between Narendra Modi and Donald Trump? In fact, after the Howdy event, the Republican supporters even borrowed Prime Minister Narendra Modi's slogan, saying, "Ab ki baar Trump Sarkar" in the United States. So how much of an impact do you see that playing up in the minds of the Indian American voters?
Well, definitely, the camaraderie and the bonding between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, I mean, that's there for all to see, the Howdy Modi event and the President Trump's trip to India. But again, I mean, that's for the Republicans and, but for the Democratic voters, again, those who have been traditionally voting Democratic, I don't think so that will play that much of a difference, because then they know that they want to vote for Biden. But overall, the India-US relations going forward and between these two leaders, we've seen that it has really sort of strengthened, whether it's defense ties, business, people-to-people contact between the two countries has strengthened under President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. And a lot of the Indian Americans here, they are not able to vote because they're not citizens, so they are on visas. So, in those categories, yes, I mean, there are a lot of people who support President Trump and Prime Minister Modi and who have a strong support for these two leaders. But those who are able to vote, because that's the main demographic that really will matter. So that about 1.8 million people who can vote, in that sense, it's leaning more towards the Democratic Party. But again, the Indian diaspora here as such, it has a strong support for Prime Minister Modi and Trump and their friendship together.
Okay. As you've been someone who's closely following the subject, I believe you're still outside at a rally somewhere. What does your assessment say? What are the kind of factors that matter for the Indian diaspora when they have been, deciding who to vote for this time?
Yeah, so as I was saying, we saw the Carnegie report, and they had polled the community also for issues that the community thinks is important for them this time, and economy, healthcare, taxation, immigration, all these, education, these were all figured very high on the list of important issues, and foreign policy or U.S. ties with India was really at the towards the bottom end of the spectrum. So there is a certain narrative that Indian Americans, pay a lot of attention to what the U.S. is doing with India. It's important to them, but not important enough to vote or influence the vote. So that's what that survey and the one before that also. These two surveys established that Indian Americans have they vote along this. I mean, they as all Americans. I mean, issues that are important to other Americans are also the same issues that they're important to Indian Americans, like economy, healthcare, immigration, education.
Okay.
So that these are the important issues for Indian Americans also.
Right. Yoshita, what's your opinion? Because prominently, as he said, these are factors that would be playing up. How much of a big factor is the strong US-India relationship? Because that's what the Donald Trump campaign has mostly been riding on. He's confident that because of the stronger ties between India and US in the recent years, he is confident that the Indian American community is going to vote for him. In fact, we also heard Nikki Haley say that the India-US relationship has never been stronger than ever before, as is currently. So what do you think? How much of an importance does this factor hold for the Indian diaspora? Or are the local issues more important?
Right. I think, in this election, this election is happening under the shadow of this coronavirus pandemic that has been going on for almost a year now. It has impacted lives in ways that nobody knew and nobody sort of predicted. So as Yashwant pointed out, the pandemic, healthcare, the economy, economic recovery, all that are playing on the minds of the voters in this election particularly. And yes, India-US relations are important. I mean, but India-US relations have enjoyed sort of a bipartisan support in America. Both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have strong, ties, and they want to have strong ties with India even going forward. So, yes, but for the American voter, the Indian American is eventually the American voter. And for them, how will the economic recovery be after the pandemic? Because there are a lot of Indian businesses, small and medium-sized businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic, what the economic recovery will be, how much easy will it be. So I think that's also playing more on the mind of the Indian American voters. They are going to sort of, balance how the Trump administration will help them or the Biden administration could help them going forward in their recovery, emerging from the pandemic, the vaccines, healthcare systems, because this pandemic has also brought to, the spotlight the inadequacies of the American healthcare system for everybody. And the Indian American voters are also a part of it. So clearly, and even social justice, racism, that's been a very important factor in this election also, that is going to be played on the minds of the voters. So I think these are the main issues that will play, that will have an impact. And yes, India-US relations will be critical, but as you mentioned, that it's a strong relationship already. Yes, and both the parties have always worked towards having a strong relationship with India going forward, especially in the context of China. Again, they would want a stronger relationship with India, but it can be sort of an important point. But I think healthcare, economy, pandemic, social justice, racism, these are more important issues that are right now playing on the minds of the voters overall.
Okay, these were issues, national issues, local issues that Yoshita pointed out. Do you have some issues which directly affect the Indian diaspora that come to your mind, which they want from either of the candidates? Some policies that they don't like of both Democrats and Republicans, and something that they want from either of the candidates when they become president?
Like everyone else, they want the economy to improve. I mean, the economy is in a really bad shape because of COVID-19. And it's affected everyone. No community, no individual, no group has kind of escaped the impact of this epidemic. And the economic impact of the epidemic has been really devastating for everyone. So Indian Americans would like the economy to improve. They want their, one issue very close to their hearts is immigration. And not just H-1B. Which,
definitely, one important area for the Indian Americans.
Yes, because a lot of them came on H-1B and stayed on, go on to obtain green cards and citizenship eventually. So that's an important issue, which is where the Trump administration has been tightening the program with a lot of scrutiny, with a lot of. So they would like that to get moving. Immigration. President Trump has wanted to move it from family-oriented to merit-oriented, which is merit-based, which is also Indian Americans are okay with that because they stand to benefit either way. And economy, healthcare would be really important because health insurance, as you know, everyone knows, health insurance is frightfully expensive. I mean, hospital expenses are frightfully expensive.
Definitely. So quite a lot of factors which could play up on the minds of the Indian voters. What's come out of this discussion, and as both our eminent panelists have pointed out, that Indian Americans are more visible today in terms of contributing to public life in the United States. The community has grown in size, influence, and of course in political and civic involvement in the US. More Indian Americans are joining politics and government, and they could definitely play a decisive role in deciding the political discourse in America. Thank you to both of you for joining us on discussion today and putting things into perspective for us and our viewers, helping us understand the significance of the Indian vote in the US elections. Thank you once again, sir and ma'am, for joining us on Rajya Sabha TV. That's it from us on the show today. We'll be back same time tomorrow with another topic of current significance that affects you in your daily life. You can also watch our program on YouTube. Make suggestions about subjects that you want us to take up on our program every morning. So thank you very much for your time and keep writing to us.